quadrants that we counted, we get an average, and then we multiply that by the total number of quadrants. The student put on here that we used random selection to reduce bias. One of the most common questions I got while this was going on and from town citizens was, well, did you count here? Well, did you count over here? Because every time I go by there, there's all these deer. And so the student was going to explain that, well, we have to have that random selection, otherwise we're just counting all the places with lots of deer in them, right? We're going to go everywhere that overview,